Hello everyone, you are all very welcome to Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet's Lock Down Your Learnings, New Ways for Strange Days. And this is a webinar series which will actually run until the middle of December. So still more events to catch up with. So look, today's webinar is about aligning your organization's business and human capital strategy for competitive advantage. And I'm Carmel Summers, and I'm the Human Capital Strategist for Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet. So look, before we get going, I want to cover out a few housekeeping items with you. One, this session is being recorded, so if for any reason your line drops or you need to leave early, you can actually pick up the webinar at a later stage. Participants are muted on entry, but there is a Q&A button at the end of your screen. So if at any stage during the webinar you have any questions you want to ask, please feel free to use that Q&A facility, and I'll endeavour to answer as many of those as I can at the end of the session. And my colleague Donna is in the background, and she's helping to facilitate all of this. Let's take a look at really why we're here today. So, when we think about it, it's new technologies that are pretty much driving the fourth industrial revolution. But it's people who actually bring those technologies to life in businesses. Leaders play a pivotal role in helping to lead organizations in the future of work. And success very much depends on the organization's ability to effectively prepare their employees by fostering a culture of reskilling, upskilling, and lifelong learning. And a lot of this isn't really new to us. We're pretty much aware that that's kind of where we are today. But there are a multitude of challenges that are facing today's organizations, and they include everything from designing and developing new products and services, finding and retaining new customers, innovating to try and stay ahead of the competition, managing change and market fluctuations, improving productivity, driving growth. And a lot of that is driving growth in downturn. And given the current, I suppose, pandemic situation globally, in many cases, we're trying to do all this with a somewhat demoralized and understaffed workforce. So these are some of the most pressing business challenges. But when we think about them, there's a common denominator underlying all of them. And it's that the organization's human capital and human talent. Okay, so, and I tend to use the words interchangeably. So they're the individuals who execute the organization's strategies and respond to new competitive challenges. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that organizations with an aligned human capital and business strategy outperform those who don't. When employees are invested in the company's success, they feel a personal sense of achievement when they land that big client or launch that new product. So to achieve this benefit, it's really important that the people strategy is aligned with the business strategy. And when business success and personal success are intertwined, organizations can really harness the full potential of their talented teams and drive the business forward very much from the ground up. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. So let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to look at, what's your organization's business strategy? Why would you align it with your human capital strategy? What are the key principles around this? And some techniques to align both of those strategies together. So, I think we've all at some time or other engaged in that exercise that's called the telephone game. It tends to be used at, quite a few training programs where I whisper a statement to the person beside me, who repeats it to the next person, and so on. And then the last person actually repeats the statement out loud. And how often have we seen that final statement has diverged significantly from the initial statement? For many organizations, their strategy actually mirrors that process. The leadership team expend significant time and effort to create the strategy, which is filtered down through the organization until it ultimately reaches the folks on the front line. But ask any person on the front line what the strategy is, and you're likely to be met with blank stares and confusion. And even if you kind of ask the question a different way, like, how does your work contribute to the organization's success? Many still can't come up with an answer. So clearly these companies aren't doing a great job of aligning their talent and their business strategies. And equally, the communication of the strategy has become much like the telephone game, except this isn't an exercise. Like, we're not on a training program. This is real life in business today. So before we go any further, I'm going to give you, I suppose, a kind of a high level description of a business and a human capital strategy so that the concepts are clear from the outset. So a business strategy is the organization's plan of action to secure their competitive position in the marketplace. It involves how the organization will carry out its operations, how it will meet the needs of its clients, and ultimately its business goals. And this is all encapsulated in the organization's vision, mission, and values. A human capital strategy, on the other hand, outlines the human resources and skills needed for the organization to achieve its goals. Without a team of people with the necessary skills to execute the business strategy, achieving the business goals will never be fully successful. And I often think of this kind of in terms of a road trip. If we don't all know what time we're leaving at, exactly where we're going, how long it'll take to get there, what needs to be done before, en route, or when we arrive, we'll still likely get there, but we may not arrive in time for the event we wanted to attend. And it's the same with business strategy. We may achieve it, but less successfully than if we actually aligned both the business and the human capital strategies, as we'll see as we go through this session. So aligning the business and human capital strategies is a key issue for organizations who want to get the maximum value from their most important intangible asset, which is their people. Numerous studies have said that the people are disconnected from the organization's strategic direction. And one report actually cites that more than 60% of employees said that they actually know their organization's mission, vision, or values, which are core to the business strategy. That's almost 2/3 of an organization's workforce. And a human capital strategy is a fundamental component of strategic business management, and it's a key component in achieving the organization's strategic mission, vision, and values. It also means that the organization's talent is considered when designing and implementing the business strategy and the operational policies and practices that flow from that. So what I mean by that is that in defining a business strategy and aligning it with your human capital strategy, we're considering a range of things related to the organization's employees. Things like the roles and the skills that are needed, whether they exist in the organization today or not. And these are just two aspects, which have a direct bearing on how the business strategy will be implemented. So ultimately, an organization's ability to achieve its business strategy is predicated on mobilizing the talent required to successfully execute the strategy. So what are the benefits of aligning the business and the human capital strategies? Well, firstly, it ensures that everyone's on the same page. So regardless of the part of the business an employee is in, they understand where the organization is going and what needs to be done to get there. Everyone is focused towards the company's crucial objectives. A statistic in this area is that organizations who align their talent and business strategies outperform other companies and typically see their strategic success rate rise to around 89%. Secondly, responsibilities associated with specific goals are known and understood. I know what I'm doing and I know how it contributes to the organization. And this goes beyond just knowing the strategy as it relates to my business area. In effect, I see the bigger picture. With talent and business alignment, retention is increased as companies tend to see up to 30% more employees being retained. And that's in the top performer group within the organization. So being able to retain 30% more of your top performers. Employees have greater ownership of their roles and are more committed and have greater accountability towards the success of the business. So this in turn improves overall employee performance and organizational productivity. Another statistic that's related to this is that these organizations achieve 30% more higher employee performance, and they spend 31% less time on people-related issues. So taking a look at the key principles around aligning both your human capital and your business strategy, it's important to set up the organizational structures, including the hierarchical design, the decision rights in the organization, the incentives, the metrics, so that they reinforce the organization's identity, the organization's value proposition, and its critical capabilities. If the structures don't support the strategy, they really should be removed or they should be changed. Otherwise, they just get in the way. So many leaders want more simplicity, just a few products, a clear and simple value chain, and not too many scheduled projects. But life is, rarely like that, I guess. In large organizations, execution is complex, capabilities are multifaceted, clients want different things, internal groups design new products or processes without necessarily consulting one another, and then mergers and acquisitions just add lots of new ways of doing things. However, the answer is really to constantly seek simplicity, but in a selective way. Like most things, not all complexity is the same, but one advantage of aligning your strategy with your organization's talent capabilities is that it does help you to see your operations more clearly. You can distinguish the complexity that truly adds value, for example, a supply chain maybe that's tailored towards your most important customers, from the complexity that just gets in the way. So an example of that would be sort of having a large volume of suppliers when really one or two would actually serve your needs. The people in your day-to-day operations, wherever they are and whatever level they're at, actually make decisions on behalf of the organization. If they're not motivated to deliver on the strategy just won't reach your customers. And it's well established that financial rewards and other tangible incentives, they kind of only go so far in motivating people. And employees make a greater personal contribution when they understand why their role makes a difference and why the organization's advancement actually makes a difference to their advancement. Therefore, what we tend to find is leaders who are successful tend to spend time and focus their attention on the connection between the strategy and the human capital, and actually sharing that with the people in their teams. So another aspect that's important here is not to forget the role of HR, who really need to have a more strategic role in the operation. And they then are key to aligning both of those strategies, because typically HR owns a large proportion of the talent initiatives that happen in the organization. So let's take a look at how we go about aligning the business and the human capital strategies. So let's begin with recruitment. So knowing what you need to hire and knowing why you need to hire are two separate things. If you align your talent strategy against your business strategy, it really makes it easy to see what the gaps are and which ones need to be filled and when they need to be filled. So focusing on this means that job requirements become more specific, the onboarding process can be streamlined, and employees aren't necessarily then threatened when new additions join the team, because they also know exactly what that person is joining for, what skill they bring to the overall team. So when we look at communicating the strategy, the key here is to link the team's everyday efforts to the overall goals of the organization, and to make it easy for managers and employees to visualize how their work flows up to the larger organizational strategy and impacts it. By aligning the leadership team on the strategy, you ensure that the team gets the right message every time. And this approach empowers employees because they know precisely how their daily task actually fits into the larger picture. Keep the message simple, but make sure that it's meaningful. Most organizations do have a deeper meaning as to why they exist, and that tends to influence strategy, decision making, and behaviors at the executive level, but it's not always well articulated for employees. What you call it doesn't really matter. It could be your purpose or your mission, but what does matter is that you establish its relevance with the employees in a way that makes them care about the company and about the job that they do. So it should be at the core of all your communications, a simple and inspiring message that is kind of easy to relate and it's understandable. Effectively, this is about making the message relevant to the audience. Have a focus on market and customer insights. So for employees to fully understand how your strategy is different and better than the competition, they need to be in touch with the reality of the marketplace. And the challenge here is how to effectively convey these market realities so that the employees can act upon them. So building internal campaigns based on market and customer insights, you tend to bring your strategy to life for your employees. So maybe consider using customer stories or guest speakers to help articulate the marketplace messages from the client's viewpoint. Communicate top down and across the organization. So often corporate communications take a kind of a strictly top down approach, but dialogue at the grassroots level is equally important. Employees are often more likely to believe what leaders say when they hear similar things from their peers. And these conversations can, in many cases, be a lot more persuading for them and more engaging than just these one-way top-down presentations. So it might be worthwhile pulling together a team of employees to serve as almost like ambassadors for the organization, who are responsible for kind of delivering some of these important messages across all levels in the organization. And if you rotate that group annually, you get more people involved in being able to represent the strategy inside the company. When the message comes from someone in leadership, make sure it's from the most visible, well-regarded leaders in your organization or leader. And kind of don't take that approach, which we know so well, which is, we stand up at the start of the year and we do a big event to tell everybody what our strategy is, and then we disappear. And it's never heard of it until maybe next year when the next version of the strategy appears. So ensure that the message is included in regular employee communications, whatever those mechanisms are, and to actually have a follow through at some stage during the year so that people see that there is progress towards what's happening in the organization from a strategy perspective. To take off the corporate person and executive hat, not many people are deeply inspired by, I suppose, a lot of the communication that organizations deliver, really because I suppose a lot of it tends to ignore one of the most important truths of communication, which is kind of being real. Corporate speak can sound hollow and kind of often tends to lack meaning. So you want to focus on getting an authentic message from a leader that actually helps employees to see the challenges and opportunities as the leader is facing them. And that helps them to understand and care about the direction the leadership team is actually trying to take the organization. Also, facts and figures tend to get lost in the conversation. So stories and experiences, are much better remembered. So maybe start to use storytelling as much as possible to bring authenticity and help employees understand the relevance of the strategy, using real life examples of the progress and any shortfalls against the strategy. Make the necessary investment. A lot of executives recognize how important their employee audience is. They're the largest expense in the organization. They often communicate directly with customers. They single-handedly control many of the perceptions that consumers have about our brand. And if this is true, why do organizations invest so little in internal communication campaigns? And if you don't win over your employees first, you certainly won't succeed in winning customers if employees ultimately hold that relationship in their hands. So it's kind of worth thinking about. And then follow through. So really it's the manager's responsibility to ensure that we continue to keep the organization strategy alive in the teams throughout the year. So create the environment. I think the first step here is to create an environment that is attractive to employees, and that environment will vary depending on the needs, their needs and their role. So, for example, creatives tend to want the freedom to express themselves. Career-driven people want the opportunity to prove themselves and climb the corporate ladder. Analytical employees want interesting problems to solve. Graduates tend to want to gain experience and to learn, while older professionals may have quite different requirements. They may want more responsibility or less responsibility, or maybe more flexible working. So what's important is to find out what matters most to the people in your business and create incentives that satisfy those needs. The key is to help more people become invested in their role in the organization. From this foundation, you actually can build a business structure that encourages personal growth and development and provides opportunities to apply learning to the business. In addition to training and development, it's also worth exploring business opportunities that challenge individuals or teams and give them the opportunity to use the skills that they're developing. Okay, a key area around this is very much capturing metrics. And the first step for HR, who typically are the ones that are responsible for talent-related metrics in the organization, is to focus on those metrics that the senior leadership team want to see. So this is likely going to mean getting rid of a lot of the current HR and recruitment metrics and shifting to high business and revenue impact metrics. So most of those folks who create in HR today, who create the HR and recruitment type metrics, they don't tend to focus on what the CEO will find meaningful. So what we typically see is that these metrics regularly don't result in any action being taken. Why? I mean, mainly because CEOs and the leadership team are absolutely focused on the strategic imperatives of the business. These metrics don't directly, I suppose, focus on the strategic goals like increasing revenue or productivity or innovation. So they simply don't encourage executives to act. In fact, one survey recently said that only 12% of CEOs had faith in the metrics that they were receiving today. And that's an abysmal number when you think about it. And really that's because the metrics are mostly tactical and they tend to focus on costs rather than the strategic metrics that really demonstrate the impact that human capital is having on the organization's performance and revenue. So here I've kind of got a few metrics that I think will have a better chance of actually getting, the attention of the CEO and the senior leadership team. And the first is revenue per employee. And it's the most effective way of measuring the productivity and the innovation output value of the organization's employees. This metric is pretty widely accepted by CFOs as the standard workforce productivity metric. And the great news is the formula is really simple. It's really just the total yearly corporate revenue divided by the average number of employees in that year. And another really good thing about this metric is that the information that you're using there is typically publicly available. So it makes it easy for an organization to be able to compare their organization with other organizations within the same industry sector. The second one is performance improvement for new hires. If you hire a number of new employees and each one performs a few percentage points better than those that they replace, obviously the productivity in the team will improve. And if you hire a lot of people during a given year, you can actually simplify that metric by maybe just measuring those key roles in the organization where you actually have measures already in place. And a lot of the measures around performance, productivity, tend to be in areas like sales or collections or call center or technical support reps. And in addition to that, if you actually wanted to augment that measure, you could add on retention rates for new hires and maybe diversity of hires in these key roles. Losing top performers is just extremely difficult for every organization, regardless of, whether we're in good times or in bad times. So, being able to measure the percentage of employees in key jobs who voluntarily leave each month over the course of the year is actually really important. And you should really weigh that turnover by performance, because losing top performance has a high cost and a high impact to the organization. Then you could take a look at revenue lost due to vacancy days. So this is a recruitment metric, and it focuses on the revenue and productivity loss as a result of slow recruiting. So obviously when an employee leaves, there's a loss of productivity and revenue until the position is filled. But if you also maybe have some issues in your recruitment or process, or maybe it's due to just a very slow, very high demand role in a very slow market, it's really worthwhile being able to capture the impact of that cost on the organization. And again, here's one that is again going to impact our bottom line in terms of generating our revenue for the year. So I suppose in addition to, looking at those sort of fixed metrics, it's really worthwhile looking at some hot talent areas that are, maybe high up on the leadership team's agenda. And these tend to be things like increasing innovation or onboarding in an organization, developing leaders, diversity in customer impact positions, key skills shortages, and maybe internal organizational moves. So it's worth peppering those metrics, throughout the year, because they are likely to be, you'll very quickly be able to figure out with your leadership team which ones are most important for them at a given time. And it's worthwhile making sure that we actually capture some of those and that we include them when we deliver the metrics. In addition, then, what HR programs are helping to increase productivity? So here it's about coming up with metrics around those HR initiatives, whether they're learning and development programs, onboarding initiatives, or skills assessments that are actually in place to really try and drive productivity. The best way is to actually survey a sample group of your managers and employees and ask how much a specific HR program is contributing to their reaching their productivity goals. And, when you get that feedback, if you do it against a scale and maybe everything below an 8, you want to find out why, so that you can actually tweak the program and improve it as you go forward, so that you actually have some context for why certain programs are maybe not hitting the mark as you would have expected them or wanted them to. Don't forget about developing leaders. So look, we're in a world that with constant disruption in the workplace, and it really is crucial that management development continues. And it's likely to be another key metric area for the senior leadership team. So, how are leadership development programs progressing? Are leadership initiatives driving performance? And we know that leadership is changing rapidly, and particularly given the current working environments, which are, changing so quickly. And you'll see, I suppose, from this webinar that, in aligning your business strategy and your human capital strategy, there's a significant focus on the talent and the people in the organization. And really, leaders are at the core of that focus. So supporting and developing leaders for the new world of work, new working models, it is a key area for organizations in the fourth industrial revolution or in the future of work, whichever lens you view that through. So again, worth ensuring that you're capturing metrics around that and that you are sharing those with the leadership team. I suppose to wrap up, just a couple of sentences here, which is very much around, people are an organization's biggest expense. 64% of total company costs are labor costs. However, 72% of an organization's value comes from their employees. So what we know from that is that employees are our biggest expense, but they're also our most valuable asset. And back to the topic, and I suppose how this aligns is that, if we create a business strategy, but we do it in isolation from our people strategy, effectively, you're going to have an impact on what is your biggest expense, but also what is potentially your most valuable asset. At the end of the day, your business strategy will be carried out, it will be operated on, it will be delivered on by that talent, that human capital in your organization. So aligning the two strategies makes a huge amount of sense, because it actually makes sure that the two things are going in the one direction. And, you'll see from what I've covered today, it's also all about how we communicate it. So making sure that people see the value in the strategy that you have in place and how they actually contribute to it. We're going to go into the Q&A. So can you please define how you measure performance per employee? Okay, so Katrina, that performance per employee is around looking at your overall revenue for the year, and you divide that by the number of people in your organization in that given year. What do you think are the major drivers for businesses in the current climate? Oh, yeah, okay, that's a big one. Okay, so talent certainly is one of the biggest drivers in the current business climate, very much because it's all about how we attract talent, how we retain talent, how we train them, how we're engaging them. And that's, an absolutely huge area for businesses. And businesses are very concerned with it, obviously, as we are in that space where, people are working in very different working models now as well. Driving innovation is another area that's a critical driver for businesses. How do we innovate? Especially, I suppose, when we're sort of in markets with, disruptive innovation, it does absolutely help for people to be able to see where the organization is going and how they might innovate. So the more they understand where the organization is going, the easier it makes it for them to actually be able to bring up innovative ideas. And I suppose maintaining a strong culture and having common values across the organization, again, is important. And we kind of looked at that a little bit when we talked about environment as we go through this. It really is a big driver for organizations, because people tend to want, I think they want to feel like they belong in an organization, and they want to understand what their purpose in the organization is and how it contributes to the overall success of the organization. So I suppose I'd pull out those three things. So talent, innovation, and your culture and purpose. Okay, we've one here, which is aligning your people strategy and your business strategy difficult? Deirdre, a simple answer is yes. I think understanding the concept is easy. I don't think there's any real difficulty in people understanding I have a business strategy and it makes sense for me to align my people strategy with that. But when you go down under the covers, absolutely, to implement that in an organization, is very widespread. And even if you only take one area, I mean, if you look at communications that we covered today, there's a huge amount of things within communicating your strategy that are important and that actually take time to get right and take time to do. So when you compare that with something like, we're doing our business strategy and we figured out that we want to be able to, let's say, have more data around our customers' buying habits. So effectively, we're going to look at data analytics for our organization. So if that's part of our business strategy, well, when we look at that in the context of our people strategy, we're going to ask the questions like, well, do we have people with data analytics skills today? If we don't, what skills do we need? What kind of roles do we need? If we think we actually have some of that in the organization, it may require us to do some form of a skills analysis. And all of those things take time. And there are ways to simplify the process. But, yes, actually, aligning these two processes is by no means a small task. But I think you can do it in bite-sized pieces. I think you can focus on the really important things for the strategy in a given year, and you can do them piece by piece. And I mean, ultimately, I think it's like with everything, there will be low-hanging fruit that will be easy to do, and then there will be the more complex and more difficult or more involved processes that will need to happen in order to align both of the strategies. But ultimately, all of the research will tell you that aligning the two actually does result in organizations having better competitive advantage, having better results from a revenue perspective at the end of the year, having better innovation within their organization. And typically you will see things like you don't tend to lose your high performers, people that they have a purpose and that they really belong in the organization, I guess, or with the organization. So thank you for that question. So let me just tell you about the upcoming webinars for next week. So next week, as I mentioned, we have Claire Dillon, and that session is moderated by Paul Hearns, and that's the 5th of November at 2 p.m. And our upcoming webinars for the 12th of November, we've got Leo Payton and Paul Priest, Joan Mulvihill the following week on the 19th, Creativity, Culture of Innovation, Mark O'Sullivan on the 26th, Maximizing Research, Development and Innovation, supported across the full project lifecycle. Lavinia Morris on the 3rd of December, Enterprise Change and Innovation, the must-win battles for companies seeking value from a digital business model. Paul Hearns then on the 10th of September with, one of those big topics from a technology perspective, quantum computing and what it means for you. So I would like to say that I really hope that you enjoyed the session today, and thank you for taking the time out to be with us. I hope you found it worthwhile, and do feel free to pass the information about these webinars on to any of your friends or colleagues that you feel might enjoy or might be interested in attending them. And one of the things I sort of would just like to say is that if anybody wants to book the sessions, they can book it at ICT Skillnet's website, which is www.ictskillnet.ie. This particular webinar that I covered today, if it's of interest to you, I've put my email address at the end of the slides that you're looking at, carmel.summers@ictskillnet.ie. Please feel free to reach out to me. This is an area that is of real interest to us at Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet, and it's an area that I'm very much focused on, and I would very much welcome the opportunity to discuss your human capital strategy in the context maybe of aligning it with your business or just your human capital strategy in general. So I would be really delighted to discuss that topic with anybody. So if you would like to share the challenges or the opportunities that you see, or just have a chat about it, please reach out to me. If you're thinking of aligning your strategies, whatever it is in this whole area of human capital strategy, I would be, delighted to have a chat with you. So I close with that offer. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And I hope we'll see you back here next Thursday at 2:00 when we'll have Paul Hearns and Claire Dillon. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programmes. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.